Hi, welcome to the Purple Pixie. Thank you for joining me today in the fairy garden, aka my craft room, where I make stuff on a shoestring budget and then invite you to tell me if it was magic or mishap. I have a feeling you're really going to like the two projects I have for you today. The first one being this Faux Wood Mail Board. I made it for my daughter using an 11x14 canvas, some Cork Board, and toilet paper tubes. She wanted Farmhouse Glam. So how do you make toilet paper tubes into something glam? I'm about to show you how. For starters, I'm going to take these toilet paper tubes that I've been saving, and no, I didn't dig them out of the trash because, like, ew. I have a bladder the size of a pea. Get it? Bladder, pea. Alright, well, I thought it was funny. Anyway, it doesn't take me long to save up some of these. And I actually use them for a lot of things, which I'll be showing you in some future videos. But for now, I'm going to use this Scotch tape as a guide. It's going to help me cut a straight line, and it's also going to show me where to fold the toilet paper tube so that I can attach it to my canvas. That'll make a little more sense later on. Now that I have them all cut open, I'm going to score 2 of them, so that'll give me the lip that I need to glue them to the canvas. And then I'm going to measure the other 2 tubes to fit inside of the folded tubes. I'm going to use some Gorilla Wood glue to glue these together. Because let's face it, these cheap toilet paper tubes are gonna need a little extra strength to hold anything. Once those are set aside to dry, I'm going to make this piece of copy paper into a piece of wood. Sounds like magic, right? Well, it's not. I just basically layer a bunch of different shades of brown using the dry brush method. It's a lot like distressing without the sandpaper. If you've never distressed or dry brushed before, it's really simple and almost impossible to mess up. And trust me, if anyone can mess something up, it's me. But if you don't like the way it's looking, just keep going back over it with whatever shade it needs to blend it until you get the desired look. Kinda like makeup. Though, I really wouldn't know anything about makeup these days. I think the last time I truly got gussied up, Obama was still in office. So, I'm starting out with my darkest color first. It's Burnt Umber by Folk Art. And just a little is all it takes. One thing about me is I hate wasting paint. But for this method, it's much easier to use a paint tray than dipping your brush in the lid or the bottle. So, you lightly dip your brush into the paint, then dab off the excess, and again, lightly start painting brush strokes onto your surface. It's okay if it's a little heavy here and there. We can blend those areas later. I don't want full coverage yet because I may want some of the white to show through in the end. And I'm almost done with the second shade of brown, which was Territorial Beige by Apple Barrel. And now the last shade that I'm using is Khaki, also by Apple Barrel. And I'm just going to repeat the same process, lightly making streaks over the paper. You may have noticed that I didn't even wash my brush in between colors. I find that helps to blend them a little better. Then I went back with some more burnt umber that I mixed with the other 2 shades and just kind of filled in some gaps. This will also kind of make it look like there are some notches in the bark. Once that wooden paper is dry, I'm going to apply it to my toilet paper tubes, which have also been drying and being held together with paper clips. I want to make sure the paper covers all of the areas that will be seen, so I start by gluing it to the lip that I created earlier. I'm using some more Gorilla Wood glue to apply the paper because it's now pretty thick and I don't think Mod Podge would hold it very well. Besides, another layer of the wood glue will give it another layer of strength. If I were using Mod Podge, I would have used a brush to paint it on. But When it comes to tougher adhesives, I prefer to just use my fingers because it's much easier to clean up. And if there's one thing we all need, it's an easier way to clean. Am I right? This method does get pretty sticky though, so be careful not to tear your paper. Once it's all glued down, I'm going to trim off the ends just a little. I don't want to trim too close to the tube because I don't want the cardboard to show. Now I'm going to paint the canvas to look like wood also. I used this 11 by 14 flat canvas because it was all I had on hand. But I recommend you use the framed canvases, and I'll show you why later on. I gave the canvas a good coat of white for no good reason. Like, seriously, you could skip that step if you want. I just wasn't sure where I was going with this faux wood grain, so I was trying to tone down the texture on the canvas. Then I used the same technique I used on the copy paper to start making the wood grain look. Only I'm starting with the territorial beige this time. I load my brush, which seems to be thirstier than a dog in the desert, and I give the canvas a very light coat. I'm keeping my brush strokes horizontal so they'll end up looking like, well, like a piece of wood. Then I come in with the khaki, and then test the color of the tubes against the board to see what color I needed next. I decided on the burnt umber again, but this time I blended it with the other two shades to soften it up a bit. I allow parts of my brush to pick up just the burnt umber color and make some dark marks on the canvas. I go around the edges to give it a little more definition and depth. If you notice, I'm not too worried about covering the bottom of the canvas because that's where the cork board is going. In order to make the wood look like shiplap, I take my ruler, a small brush, some of that burnt umber paint, and I just make light lines across the canvas. They don't even have to be solid lines because while the paint is still wet, I smudge and blend it with a baby wipe. Now, usually I would use a wet paper towel, but I actually didn't have any right by me, so I sacrificed this baby wipe, and with all this brown, it ended up looking like it was used on a baby's butt anyway. So, there's that. Think you got the faux wood painting technique down yet? Well, here's one last step. With that same small brush and that same burnt umber paint, go in and paint some notches in the wood. Just smear a little paint here and there, blend it with that baby wipe. This totally brings the whole wood look up a notch. See what I did there? And it will give it a more realistic look. Now, I jumped into this project so fast that I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Crystal, otherwise known as the Purple Pixie. I've been a crafter since I was old enough to hold a crayon. However, I didn't get my first glue gun until I was in middle school, and I still have and use it to this day. That's right, my glue gun is over 30 years old. I don't know how that's even possible, considering I'm only 29 again myself, but it's true. If you're new here, please don't be shy. Give me a big hello in the comments and let me know you stopped by. I really love making new friends, and the more the merrier. And now to finish up the wood notches, I'm going to take a little bit of that lightest shade, which is again khaki, and we're just going to smudge and smear a little bit into the burnt umber. And now it's really looking fire. I did it again. Did you catch it? Fire? Wood? Okay, never mind. I know I'm horrible. For this next step, I'm taking my box cutter to cut a piece of cork board that I've had for a few years. I've already measured it out to fit my canvas, and of course I'm using my self-healing mat to keep from butchering my desktop. I'm also using a metal ruler as a guide to cut a straight line. Side note, the ruler didn't help much. I still got it crooked, just like everything else I try to get straight. Lord help me, I can't cut, paint, or draw a straight line. I mean, what kind of crafter am I? I once tried to draw a stick figure, and he came out so crooked I had to draw him a cane. And that came out crooked too. And here I go, having to clean up my crooked line. I swear, I am such a mess, y'all. And you know that if it's slightly off, it's gonna be very noticeable. And with that in mind, imagine me trying to give myself a haircut. Yeah, thanks, COVID. Okay, moving along. I'm adding these little brads to my board to mimic nail heads. So I'm going to take this tool that I inherited from my mom's stash of supplies, and I'm piercing a hole in the tubes and later in the cork board too. I'm not too sure what this tool is actually for, but I think it's for putting snaps on clothing. But since I don't sew or make garments with snaps, I just use it as a hearty hole punch. Sorry, Mom. Once I have my brads in, I'm going to push the prongs as tight as I can against the tubes so they'll lay flush and not interfere with whatever items placed in the slot. I also want them to be flat against the back of the cork board because I'm going to glue that down into place on the canvas. I am so sorry for being out of frame here. I'm still getting used to having to craft right in front of the camera, but I'll get the hang of it eventually. Y'all just be patient with me, please. Okay, now remember how I said you should use a framed canvas? This is why. I had to take 4 wooden shims and I had to glue them together in sets of 2 in order to make a wooden bar for the top and one for the bottom. Bottom needed to be wood so I could screw some cup hooks into it. So that meant the top had to have a wooden bar as well. 1, to hang it securely to the wall, and 2, so it would be the same depth from the wall as the bottom. So once my shims were glued together and dried, I had to glue them to the canvas. And of course I used the Gorilla wood glue and some really big clamps to hold it all together until it was completely dry. I think I let it sit overnight, a process I could have totally skipped if I'd had a framed canvas instead. And now I'm going to smear a ridiculous amount of wood glue onto the cork board, but I did that because I wasn't sure how porous the cork board would be. When I worked with some felt over the holidays, I had to put 2 layers of glue on it to make anything stick to it. The felt would just suck up the glue like that thirsty desert dog, and by the time it dried, I had to go in and re-glue everything. So I wanted to reinsure that I gave this cork board enough glue to really hold it in place. Then I clamped it down on the edges so it wouldn't curl up. Before I glued my tubes in place, I checked to make sure that they were spaced sufficiently that you could easily get envelopes in and out of them. And then again with the wood glue for a firm hold, I attached them to my board. I should have used a combination of hot glue to hold them in place while they dried, but I didn't, and therefore I had a bit of a struggle getting these to lay flat against the canvas. But it all worked out in the end, and they're holding really well. Now it was time to add the cup hooks, evenly spaced of course, so you get to see me do math. I'm just kidding, it really wasn't that hard. I knew I needed to put 1 in the center, and the other 2 evenly spaced in the center between that one and the outer edge of the board. so not that difficult. But now you see why you need the wooden frame at the bottom. See that thing on my right hand? It's a fingerless glove that I crocheted from some scrap yarn. My hands get pretty cold here in the fairy garden, and that just helps keep my palms and my wrists warm enough to work. I know it's ugly, but it works. Kinda like me. Wait, except I don't work, so never mind, forget I said that. How about, like me, it grows on you. Moving on. Now it's time to embellish this bad boy. I want to soften up the lines where things were glued on, so I use this ribbon from Dollar Tree and I hot glued it on the areas that need to be less visible. My daughter had asked for Farmhouse Glam, so I'll be adding some of this Bling Wrap to it as well. Lastly, I haphazardly wrapped some jute twine around it and made a little jute twine finger bow, as you'll see. After all, how can it be farmhouse without jute twine? And how many times am I going to say jute twine? So, while you're watching me embellish this, let me tell you about the things that I do here on my channel. Fact is, I do them all. Wait, that didn't sound very clean. How about I make all kinds of crafts and all kinds of styles? Yeah, that sounds better. I'm very eclectic, which is just a fancy way of saying I'm all over the place. I like farmhouse, shabby chic, glam, rustic, boho, and classic. I do trash to treasure DIYs, flips, or as I like to call them, makeovers, dupes, stash busting, organization videos, etc. I'll even throw in a recipe now and then. I share my wisdom and give tips and tricks that I've learned throughout the years. All 29 of them. And I also share my stupidity at times. Now, you might be saying, Chris, where are all these videos showing you doing all these things? Well, hang on there. I just started my channel. This is only my second video. So if you would, just be patient and give me a little time to upload some more content. In the meanwhile, if all this sounds good to you, consider subscribing so you can watch me grow. And stay tuned to see what kinds of challenges and collabs I come up with. My goal here is to inspire you to create your own projects and give you ideas on what to make and how you can create them for really, really cheap. I take pride in the fact that my crafts are very frugal. I mean, they're usually even cheaper than Dollar Tree. That's lower than low budget. Most of the time, I DIY my own craft supplies. Why? Because I have to. I'm disabled and broke. But it's okay. Starting from scratch is where I shine. And why do I go through all the trouble? I simply love to craft. Actually, correction, I need to craft. I'm a true DIYer because I can't just go to Dollar Tree to buy wooden shapes or boards for signs, embellishments, etc. If I get the chance to, it's very seldom. And no offense to my fellow crafters, they do amazing work. I just don't have the same means or opportunities that most of them do. If you're already a subscriber to my channel and a part of the Pixie Party, I really want you to know how much I appreciate you. Welcome back. But if you haven't subscribed already, what are you waiting for? Go hit that big red button and ring my bell so you can come party with us here in the fairy garden every time I post a video. The more the merrier, and I'd love to have you stick around. Now, after I add my little jute twine bow, I'm going to finish up on the edges with this Bling Wrap. I thought it was the adhesive kind when I bought it, but it's not. So I have to cut it down into individual strips and apply it with the glue gun. And now this project is complete. Stay tuned to the end of the video to see the final reveal. But for now, I think it's time for a break. Yep, a fur baby break. I have 2 fur babies, and they're both cats. But today, I'm introducing Sydney. Sydney is 5 years old, and I've had her since she was born. She was the only one of the whole litter that turned out with the Siamese colors. The rest of the litter was solid black. She's my shadow, and over the years has developed an addiction to catnip and cat treats. And thanks to those cat treats, she weighs about 16 pounds. She loves to sleep and can usually be found somewhere in the fairy garden when I'm crafting. She's one of my many blessings, and I thank God for her companionship every day. And now, let's get started with project number 2, Book Butcher Block. Say that 3 times fast. I saw this idea years ago on Pinterest. Yep, the almighty evil Pinterest. That was back when it was all the rage, though. I stopped using Pinterest because it would just get me into trouble. Not literally in trouble, but I already had millions of ideas of things I wanted to make, and surfing Pinterest only made it worse. I ended up with a phone full of screenshots and barely ever made anything I pinned, except for this. It's just a set of books tied together with some ribbon, and you put your knives in it. Novel idea, right? I did it again. Okay, how about sharp idea? Nope, that's just as bad. Anyway, over the years, some of my knives have hesitated to go in between the pages like they're supposed to, so I need to cut out some slots for them to fit into. That sounds easy, doesn't it? Well, nothing ever seems to come that easy for me, and this was no exception. I started by carefully removing all the knives, because me and sharp things don't seem to get along. And I decided which ones I wanted to put back in which book. Once I had that figured out, I just had to remove the old pages that had been damaged by the knives over the years, and then just trace the blade onto the pages and cut the slots out for the knives to fit into. Sounds easy, right? Sure, but just watch how I messed this one up. By the way, these books were stashed away by my mom in a box up in the attic. They were not going to be read or used ever again, so I apologize to those of you who may be cringing at the sight of me cutting up books. But wanting to be an author myself one day, I have the utmost respect for the written word. I also hate to see something go to waste though, and that is all these books were doing up in my attic. So after tracing the first blade, I grabbed my box cutter and my metal ruler to again help me cut a straight line, and I go to town. But the first few pages didn't go as planned. The whole page came out. Okay, I thought, that's alright. Try again. So I did. And the same thing happened. Ugh. That's when I said to heck with it, and I just started cutting out pages. Figured as long as I did that, there'd be a slot for the knife and I'd be golden. But I'll show you here in a little bit why this was a mistake. I repeated the same process for the next 2 knives, and as you can see, I'm trying to show you that there are slots for the knives to fit into. However, I've now removed so much of the book that when it's closed, there aren't enough pages to keep the slots open. So for the next 2 books, I was much more careful not to remove any more of the pages than necessary. By the way, the frugal crafter in me kept all those pages that I cut out because I can use them later on to decoupage with. And once I finally had all the slots cut out for all the knives, I put my ribbon back on, but decided it was now missing something. I decided to make a garland with a tassel, because now those seem to be the in thing in decor. And since I used to make jewelry, I had plenty of beads and supplies. But I neglected to realize how bad my eyesight had gotten over the years, and how hard it might be to string beads on a fishing line. So instead, I used some gold metallic crochet thread. Now, I hate this stuff. I hate to crochet with it, I hate embroidering with it, because it tangles up on itself way too easily. Kind of like the old phone cords back in the day when we had landline phones in our kitchen. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Well, this crochet thread is the same way, but I'm using it because I figured since I was using clear beads, I wanted a bit of color to show through the string. So I put a piece of tape on the end of it, because I couldn't find my beading needle, of course, and I snipped the tape off to a fine point that would fit through the beads. Next, I took this really pretty yarn that I have, and I'm making a tassel. Tassels are really easy, but I do understand how you may be a little intimidated to try one. So here's how I make mine. Instead of using my hand to wrap the yarn around, I use a scrap piece of foam core board, or cardboard, or whatever I have on hand that I can cut down to the size that I want my tassel fringes to be. I lay a strand of yarn across the top of that guide and I tape it down. Then I just start wrapping my yarn around the guide over and over and over until it's as thick as I want it to be. I want to say I wrapped this one about 50 times, but I'm not quite sure. And then, as you don't see here because my hands weren't cooperating with me again, I tie that top strand as tight as I can into a knot to hold the fringes together. Having neuropathy sucks, and it's quite frustrating at times, especially when you're trying to tell someone how easy it is to make something and then you can't even make it yourself. But I was able to go back later on and retie a tighter knot. It's kind of funny to look back on it now and watch how aggravated I was getting. I even tried using that little piece of tape to hold the string down just so I could tie the other half of the knot, but that didn't work either. So once I finally got it good enough, I decided to leave well enough alone. I take my scissors and I slide it in between the yarn and the guide, and I just cut the ends of the yarn. And not shown on camera, I used some of the same yarn to wrap around the top of my tassel and tied it onto my bead garland. And here it is. Regardless of the mishaps I had sprucing this book butcher block up, I think it turned out beautiful. The clear acrylic beads match the crystal knobs on my cabinets and drawers, and the neutral colors coincide well with my countertop, which will be getting a makeover soon, so stay tuned for that. I added a little bit of Dollar Tree ribbon to my burlap just to give it a little more of a shabby chic look. I love how it came out. And here's the final reveal of the Faux Wood Mail Board. I just love how it came out. My daughter loves it. It's holding up well, and I would gladly make another one in the future. So, what did you think of the two projects today? I really want to know, were they magic or mishap? Let me know in the comments down below. Don't be afraid to be honest. I have some tough skin and I can take it. If you like the kind of things I talked about, I hope you'll subscribe to this channel and become a part of the Pixie Party. Because if you do, it'll help me and my channel grow here on YouTube. If you don't like it, give me a thumbs down. Tell me in the comments what you think I should do differently. After all, constructive criticism never hurt anyone, especially me. Today I want to share an inspirational quote. Of all the things you create, make sure happiness is on the top of the list. And with that being said, I gotta go, folks. Because unlike me, my housework ain't gonna do itself. So until next time, remember, all of me loves all of you.